Uh, well, yes, I'm back, and I would like to acknowledge people who are here for the first time before I launch into what was an amazing couple of weeks. So we have people here from the membership team with packets, and in the packet is a little blue card. If you're here for the first time and you fill out that little blue card, which just gives us your email, and we don't bother you with a lot of emails, but we do give you what's coming up. We give you a little preview of the week and then a little recap of the week, and that's about it. And then you're in our system. So if you do that and you give back the blue card to one of these lovely ladies, you'll get this free book, How to Speak Science of Mind, and then you'll be a long ways towards understanding the philosophy that you're here to experience. So is there anyone here for the first time? Just raise your hand so we can welcome you and give you a packet. First time people, there's one right there, couple, and one right here. Welcome. Keep your hands up. Okay, that is wonderful. So welcome everybody, and we are here almost midway through the year of values. This is a values-based thematic year. We have a value each month, and we get a new one this month. I encourage everybody to look on their bulletin, and right here on the front page is a little place where you can actually write in the value that you're exploring for the week and just live it. All you need to do is kind of look at it in the morning when you're having coffee and see what happens. It'll be amazing and wonderful. So June. We're starting with June here today, and the theme for June is accountability. I love this. I love this value, and to me it means sort of responsibility for ourselves and our folks. That we do what is right and beneficial, not only for ourselves, but for the good of all. Accountability means that there is absolutely an absence of victim consciousness, where no one can say, well, it wasn't my fault that blah, 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 blah. Nope, you're accountable for your life. So it has to do with being answerable for our decisions and for the outcome of our actions. Answerable that what we do and what we say and what we stand for is of benefit. It kind of means if I am accountable, it means you can count on me. So, prayerfully, you can count on me. The values that we're talking about today are, first of all, flexible perspective, and then blessing, and finally, positive impact. So I think that these particular values are going to make more sense when we talk about the title to the talk today, which is this, Finding the Ancestors and Finding Ourselves. So we're going to be talking a lot about how we can look back and have that benefit us right now. I want to draw your attention to this wonderful altar that Susanne DuBois put together, and it's an ancestral altar. It happens to be my great-grandmother's quilt that she made by hand, and her grandfather's boots from World War I. And there are some walking sticks. There's a walking cane, and her vision there was the ancestors are walking towards us. And then there's some antique books. There's one that's like every single thing you ever want to know, or all knowledge revealed, or something like that. So be sure to stop by the altar if you have a question about anything. You know, I am just back from Scotland. I came back midweek, and this 2-week trip had 8 of our people on it. And it had 6 other religious scientists, and then it had a few other miscellaneous people that didn't know that they were like-minded. But this one woman, she was going, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? And come to see that she regularly attends the Mile High Church and Agape. so So I want to say something for you new people because we're going the slides have to do with the trip and the trip with our people on it. And so I know that you might feel like I'm telling in stories here and you're not privy to it, but and that's kind of true today. But I want you to just know that if you keep coming, then you'll feel every single time more and more us. And that's what we realized from these people that nobody knew on the trip. It took about 24 hours, and then everybody on the tour was an us. So every trip that I take to sacred sites, like this one to Scotland, puts me in contact with my ancestors, and if not my direct ancestors, it is my direct ancestors. But when you see these 5,000-year-old ancient sacred sites, you know that the people that built them had to be accountable to their progeny, or there wouldn't be any progeny. We wouldn't be here if the ancestors were not accountable. So I would love, there's nothing like being with other people 24/7, for 2 weeks. You really get to know people. And next year, the trip is going to be to the south of France and a Mary Magdalene pilgrimage. So I would love for you to think about that. And I'm going to get dates for you as soon as possible. So we were on the search of our ancestors and learning things about ourselves, because sacred travel, and that's what we went to sacred sites, and sacred travel is always transformative. So the themes of today are inspired by the travel, but hopefully they're going to be applied to each and every life so that you will not feel like you're left out at all, but absolutely included. So, and we're going to go through those values. So the first one was the flexible perspective. And the idea of a flexible perspective is to not jump to conclusions about anything. Don't jump to conclusions about a sacred site and what our ancestors used it for. Don't jump to a conclusion about, yourself. If you do something that is not the highest and greatest and you know it, what does that mean about you? It doesn't mean that you're awful. That's what it doesn't mean. And I think that a lot of us have internalized a punishment model. And so if we do something bad, it's like, oh, I'm bad. And so I want that to be something that you question at least from this moment on. So the first theme and value is flexible perspective invites an opening. So this is kind of difficult to see here, but this is a Suzanne Baldwin photograph. So this is Glenn, one of the tour guides, and this is a standing stone, one of the Stennis stones on Orkney in the background. Now, I want you to imagine, it's clearer in the image that I can see on my computer, but right here is Mary Ellen Olson standing in front of the stone, but it looks like she's actually in the stone, and the stone is being balanced on Glenn's nose. So, of course, that's not what it is, but it certainly looks like it, and so I thought that was a good photo to introduce us to the idea of having a flexible perspective. So you observe something, and then you get to ask, what does it mean? And there's great skill in looking at something 5,000 years old, or something in your life right now, and discerning its significance. What does it mean? What is the relevance to me right now? What was the relevance to my ancestors? It's a good exercise. Here, let me just advance this. And this is one of my favorite photographs of the trip, all of us kind of going across this amazing meadow. Here's Mary Ellen Olson, here's Jet Walker, here's Stan and Mariana, and here's Sophia right there. So these are people that did not know each other. Many of them did not know each other. And everyone has a personality, of course, and everyone goes through their little things that happen when they're jet lagged, or when they have an upset tummy, or when they have a sprained ankle or something like that. Everybody goes through their little things, and it's easy to jump to conclusions about people. But when you're with them for 24/7, you get a great perspective about the magnificence that each one is. And so from that, I got, it's really a great idea to pretend that, like someone that you know and love, that you're meeting them for the first time, so that you can actually have an opportunity to discover something that you may have not seen in years and years and years that they've been by you. And so the Austins, that's your assignment, to kind of pretend that you don't know each other. We'll introduce you after the service. So another example that I wanted to share with you is Skara Brae. Skara Brae is a 5,000-year-old complex on Orkney, which is an island to the north of mainland Scotland. And there are 7 of these little living spaces in a wonderful little, like a condo unit, really, you know. In fact, this is, I took this everywhere, Uriel's Machine. It's an amazing book, and this is what they have to say about Skara Brae. At first sight, the 8 best preserved of the dozen or so apartments at Skara Brae look like a set from the Flintstones movie. They appear to be a Stone Age version of a modern housing estate with a formalized regularity of layout. Some prehistoric architect appears to have planned the whole development so that stone versions of modern conveniences were provided for inside each apartment. They all have standardized stone cupboards, fireplaces, bedsteads, water tanks, and seats. And they all had locks on the doors. And so this is in the section now about perspective. It's been a common interpretation of Skara Brae that this was a village for families, that actually a family lived in this, and another family lived in the little pod next door, and next door to that, and next door to that. But more research has revealed some very interesting things, and I'm going to continue reading out of this book. Allowing your rubbish to build up around your house gives archaeologists a chance to come along thousands of years later and find out what you had for dinner. The layers of this rubbish in Skara Brae have been extensively analyzed and have revealed that the inhabitants ate mainly sheep and cattle, topped up with fish, oysters, and a very occasional side of pork. One of the features of the diet of the inhabitants of Skara Brae, which interested archaeologist Evan Mackey, was the lack of wild game. Looking at other midden, that's their word for garbage, across Orkney, he commented that the common sources of meat seem to include about 50% game along with 50% farmed meat such as sheep or cow. Keep in mind this is 5,000 years ago. The midden at Skara Brae was unusual in this respect, in that while its inhabitants ate a lot of farmed meat, they did not seem to have facilities for looking after flocks and herds over the winter. When Evan Mackey also noticed that there were far more carcass bones than there were skulls to go with them, it led him to suggest that the village might have been a prehistoric combination of monastery and college in which a highly organized community lived. He believed that the inhabitants would have divided into specialized groups of a staff of cooks, craftsmen, and so on. Certainly, the shortage of animal skulls does seem to indicate that the people here imported pre-butchered carcasses, which in turn confirms the impression that these buildings were used for some specialized purpose. So we have 2 interpretations of this, that these were family units or this was a college. This was a retreat facility. This was a Druid training facility in more recent times. And so when we think about this and hold it in a flexible perspective, we observe things and think about things that we wouldn't otherwise have probably noticed. We open to possibilities that give us an opportunity for greater wisdom and application in our own lives. So what if there was an ancient college on Orkney? There is some evidence to suggest that the standing stones on Orkney were some of the very first built before Stonehenge, and many of the ones coming down into Scotland, Ireland, and England. And if that's the case, then this wisdom originated on Orkney coming southward rather than going northward. And it predates the universities in Scotland now. There are, as opposed to England, which has 2 universities that are over 500 years old, Scotland has 4 universities that are over 500 years old. So that knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge, has been extremely, extremely important to those Scottish people. So when we go back and look at our people in the field, when we come to each person with an open perspective and not any predetermined assumptions about our friends, we are able to see each other as the unrepeatable miracle that we are. You know, it's said that if you know someone's story, you instantly have compassion for them, no matter how badly they behave, because their story makes them, and it makes us as well. So the next one, the next value is blessing. And this is a section on looking for our blessings. Now, it's really hard to see this. It's lightened up as much as possible, but this is the Glen Lyon Valley with the mist lying in all of the crevices of the valley, and the sunrise, which was absolutely blazing at 4:43 a.m. And so I woke up, I was still in jet lag, and I woke up to this right outside my hotel room window. So when you look at a culture that has been around so much longer than ours has in America, you realize that in human history, there's a lot of hardship and violence. I mean, there's a lot of the shaping of the countries happened because there were wars, and they were forced into the boundaries that they hold. And it's a miracle that our ancestors survived all that. Our lineage, there was not a break in the lineage of our people, or we really would not have been here. And so many family lines have died out. And so we think even now of the current horrific things that are happening in England with Manchester and London, and then Manila, I think, over the last few days, to consider that this is kind of it can be a heavy realm when there's so much violence. And yet, if we look for it, if we train ourselves to look for the blessings, they are there, absolutely there. So this photograph is Glencoe, and there is a story of Glencoe. This is one of my favorite places on the planet. And this actually is a photograph that came from the internet because it's from a plane or a drone or something. The road is deep, deep, deep in the valley, and these majestic mountains on either side are absolutely amazing. So the story of Glencoe, the reason that it is famous in history is because of a violent, very violent act. On February 13th of 1692, the MacDonalds were the guests of the Campbells, and that was during the time that all of the clans had to pledge their allegiance to the King of England. It was one of those times when Scotland was extremely oppressed by England, and every clan leader had to sign allegiance to the King of England. So the MacDonalds were slow. Ornery, slow, but they were going to sign. And so one of the clansmen went to Fort William, where he was supposed to sign, and this was winter, so it took him a long time through the snow to get to Fort William. And then because of shenanigans, where he was supposed to sign wasn't there anymore. And so he couldn't sign, even though he had the intention to sign. But he knew that he had the intention to sign, and so all the king's men would know that, but no. They wanted to make an example of when people don't obey the king. And so the Campbells slaughtered the McDonald's on the night of February 13th in their sleep. And there was a torch that was lit on Signal Rock that indicated when the massacre was to happen. And people were stabbed in their beds and they ran out in the snow. And this was men, women, and children. And the idea was to exterminate the McDonald's. But as with any extermination plot, it doesn't work. No extermination plot has really worked. There were those that lived to tell the tale. And so it's been a horrible story of abuse and broken trust. And England did rule in Scotland after that. They submitted. And so you look at what happened after that, and you look at some of what has to be considered blessings that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Now I don't want to minimize violence. I don't want to minimize the horror of all this, but I want us to see that if we look for it, even after horrible, horrible things, and every single one of us have had horrible things happen in our lives, if we can get beyond that and say, I am determined to find the blessing here, there will be a blessing. So one of the blessings was that some of the Scots just got annoyed and came to America and helped us with our independence. One of the other blessings was that the English required all of the Scottish children to go to school, which was a new thing. They all went to school, and so after that, 100 years after that, there was this amazing renaissance of Scottish brilliance and discoveries and inventions that served the world for time immemorial came out of Scotland because they had an educated populace. Things like the telephone, penicillin, the toaster, the flush toilet, the refrigerator, anesthesia, radar, the piano foot pedal, and hypnotherapy, among others, came in that 100 years after the doing away with the clans. So we had an experience at Glencoe, and it was my desire to, I had been to Signal Rock one other time, and I wanted to go there and do a forgiveness blessing, not only for the Scottish and the English, but for our families, to do this intense forgiveness experience after this story of this horrible massacre. So we got to Glencoe, and now, of course, it's a national preserve, and there are trails everywhere and no signage. And so I had no idea where I was going or how to direct the driver. And the tour company had never been to Signal Rock, and they were depending on me to tell them where to go. And so it was like the whole day was dependent upon, oh my God, I have no idea where to go. I have no idea where to do this ritual of forgiveness. And so there were a few of us on the bus that just said, we'll find the perfect place. This turned out to be the perfect place. This was a river running through the depths of the valley of Glencoe. And you can't hardly see this, but there's a little raised place right here of just mud that was the perfect altar for the work that we were doing with forgiveness. And so we all stood around in a circle, and we forgave the Scottish, we forgave the English, we forgave our grandparents, we forgave our parents, we forgave everyone who thinks that they can solve problems with violence, and then we buried a stone in that altar to signify that we were giving all of this agony back to Mother Earth, who knew how to neutralize it and make it into just generic energy. And so people were saying, isn't it a miracle that we found this place? So whenever we have a situation that looks dismal, if we can remember to say to ourselves, I am open for a blessing here, it's really good. Let's all say that together. I'm open for a blessing here. So the last value is leave a positive impact. Now this was a stormy day. that had a ray of sunshine that broke through a church window onto these sweet little chairs in the chapel at Iona, a holy isle from the 400s when St. Columba established his monastery there. And so the ancestors, when every place we went and we talked about the ancestors, accountable for leaving a positive impact, positive enough that we came along. So I have a wonderful, wonderful story of specific ancestors, those of you of Italian heritage. There is an Italian chapel on the island of Orkney, and there it is. It's the Italian chapel on the island of Orkney. And the story about this is that there were 3 prison camps for Italian soldiers fighting in World War II that were captured in North Africa. Why in the world they shipped them to Orkney, I do not know. But they were prisoners of war on Orkney, these 3 camps of Italian soldiers that I think probably had the easiest time of prisoners of war of World War II of any that I've ever heard of, because they were allowed to sort of recreate their culture as much as they could on this cold, cold northern island when they were used to Italy. But they recreated their sports, they recreated their food, and they needed a chapel in which to worship. And so the artisans, many different artisans, came together to create a chapel out of a Quonset hut. You can see this curved thing here. This is a Quonset hut, and they just built this facade on the front of the Quonset hut. Here's another view of it. That's the front. Isn't it? That's a little. You walk in there, and then this is what you see. This amazing circular or curved ceiling, and the craftsmanship is really unbelievable. This is painted. It is not carved. And the inside of that Quonset hut is painted, every inch of it is painted with this kind of perspective. And then this is the altarpiece with the Madonna. And so these soldiers, the war was over and they could go home, but the chapel wasn't quite done yet. And they stayed. The artisans stayed to finish their work of art. They left a positive impact. So congratulations to all of you Italians in the audience there. And so for us to think about everywhere I walk, there is an increase of good. That is leaving a positive impact. So let's say, where I walk, there is an increase of good. That's exactly right. So, that's there are images of our people on the tour that Ceci is going to run through at the very end. You know, right when we're putting chairs away. Just watch up here for just a minute because Ceci has to put down the whole system, but she's going to run through the images a couple of times. So these are our values. Once again, to be accountable to those around you, to those who preceded you, and to those coming after you, and to feel good about your life right now. Being flexible in your perspective so you are open to new ideas, to look for blessings that you can receive, and then leave a positive impact that you can give. That's the lesson for today. And then finally, if you don't get it right, it's okay, because there is always immortality. So I want to tell you about this photo in conclusion. This is a 5,000-year-old yew tree. And yew trees are planted in all of the churchyards. Usually they are planted on the cardinal directions, northeast, south, and west, of all of the churchyards back there, because these trees are symbols of immortality. This is supposedly the oldest tree in all of Europe. What happens for a yew tree is that it sends these great branching multiple trunks out in all directions, and then as it goes through hundreds of years, it begins to rot at the center, and it seemingly dies from the center, and then the trunks kind of splay out and fall over, and then something amazing happens, and that is a new shoot rises from the center of this without anybody doing anything, planting anything. It is the phoenix of the plant world. And so the yew trees are a symbol of immortality. And so I want us to all just remember that if we don't get it right now, we can get it right later. We'll be happier the sooner we get it right. So good to be home, everybody. So as we do the inner work, I want to remind you that this is the north. This is the direction of our ancestors. And just imagine your nearest ancestors, those that left you most recently, in that direction, and those behind them and them and them and them, the generations, hundreds of generations. And here is the south, and this is the direction of our progeny. And whether or not you have children, you are leaving a legacy for the children of the world. And so on this wonderful continuum of north and south, turning within and knowing that to be accountable, we are our best. And as we live from love and live from peace and live with an open heart to all of those around us, when we tell the truth and when we are responsible for our actions, we heal in both directions. We heal family hurts back through the generations, and we create a positive future for those coming after us. So in this wonderful day of today, making a commitment to ourselves, to our ancestors, and to our progeny, that we will be the best versions of ourselves that we possibly can be for the good of all and the harm of none. And so it is. Amen.